This is Cast of Wonders, the young adult fiction podcast featuring stories of the fantastic. Welcome, episode 672. I'm Alicia Caparasso, assistant editor at Cast of Wonders, and your host for today's episode. Every year, Cast of Wonders highlights some of our favorite episodes from the previous year. It's a great chance for us to take a bit of a breather and let you, our listeners, catch up on any missed back episodes with new commentary from a different member of the crew. Our story for today is Feeding Spirits by Emmy Core, which was first published as Cast of Wonders 642 in June 2025. Emmy is a writer in a shell from the land down under where bunyips may or may not reside. She is more likely to be found peeking out of her shell, embellishing events with a pen, than fighting monsters with picket sticks. If you'd like to follow her watching the world go by, she can be found on social media at Emmy Core or on her website, www.emmycore.com. This story is narrated by Tanya Jade. Tanya started acting as the result of a friendly dare, which brought out natural instincts for the craft, and she hasn't looked back. Since starting in 2014, she has been cast in a plethora of films, TV series, commercials, and theater productions. Most recently, psychological thriller feature Brother, CW's Wild Cards, and The Good Doctor on ABC. Tanya has a strong background in dance. She speaks Mandarin and some Spanish, is an advanced scuba diver, free diver, rides a motorbike, is highly adaptable, and also trains in stunts. Content warning, friendly haunting, and bereavement. And now we've a tale to tell.
Feeding Spirits, written by Emmy Core, narrated by Tanya Jade. What does one feed a hungry ancestor? Fish and chips, chicken palmy, or steak pie didn't seem like something my recently deceased Bobo would enjoy. I just returned from my backyard swamp with a full trash bag when the phone rang. The call bounced with around-the-world echoes, and I'd barely said hello when Ma started in on her visit to the medium. I asked your Bobo if she's comfortable. Ayah, Lily, cried Ma. She scolded me. She said 20 years my granddaughter doesn't come home. I go all the way to Australia to visit and she doesn't even offer me a meal. The click of Ma's tongue was like a slap. You should respect your ancestors. I couldn't tell her I didn't believe in spirits. Her disappointment already blew heavy in my ear. When I'd first landed a job in this lucky country, I'd flown Bobo over in excitement. I could fulfill my familial respect and treat her to dinner with my first pay. The rest of the family had been too busy, so treating Bobo meant everything. But she found the beef undercooked, the vegetables too soft, and everything was missing rice. She never returned, and I stopped inviting her. I might have immediately forgot about the call, except for Ma's next words. Bobo says to get protection mirror for your back door. She says there's a funny smelling thing that likes looking into your house. She's not sure if it's good or bad. A stench regularly wafted through after dark, the swamp odor blowing back into town. I'd never mentioned it to Ma, especially as it also appeared on airless nights, and definitely not to Bobo. I didn't believe in spirits, but caution seemed the wiser choice. Next morning, sweating through the summer heat, I nailed a bagua, a hand-sized round mirror in an octagonal frame, above my fly screen. My hand swatted back and forth, wishing the bagua would also reflect the blowies from my face. What's that for? Called a gravelly voice. I waved to the Aboriginal elder out on her daily inspection of the swamp. My grandma says it's for bad spirits, I shrugged vaguely. I really didn't want to come across as the crazy Chinese lady. She cackled. 20 years living here, and now you get scared. I was about to deny it, but her knowing stare pierced me. My gaze slid over the deck instead, catching an old scar left by a smashing bottle, its matching gash deep in my memory. Years ago, a gang of kids rode by daily, throwing empty Coke bottles into the swamp. One day, with my heart thumping fast, I called out to bin their rubbish. The leader sprinted up and lobbed his bottle at me, the glass smashing across the timber floor. They jeered as I ran into the house, so frightened I left my shoes on. I remained gripping a broomstick for safety all afternoon. Next day, cops door knocked through town because a boy had disappeared. By the time the search crew spotted a handlebar in the swamp, only a baseball cap was found. The elder warned everyone to stop littering the waterways if we didn't want the bunyip looking for another meal. The cops closed the case as a divorce tug-of-war, suspecting the father had grabbed his son and vanished overseas. I combed the wetlands with my trash grabber weekly ever since. Not because I believed in mythical swamp spirits, but because I had free time. The elder wheezed as she left. "Be good to the swamp. That'll protect you better than a mirror." Her words stuck like the midges on my sweaty face. I set Popo's smiling photo on a corner of my desk, facing the memorial altar, toward the water, for good energy flow. Popo didn't need to know what kind of water was in that swamp. With no family here, cultural rituals like these were as rusty and bent as the nails in my outhouse. I spoke aloud to dispel my unease, setting a bowl of sand beside her face. "Dibuchi, Popo. I'm sorry. I didn't know you came to see me." Heat rose to my cheeks as I talked to the air. The packet of joss sticks I held mocked me. Was I supposed to use 1 or 3? I picked one so the packet would last longer. A disapproving prickle walked across the nape of my neck. Lighting the joss, I bowed 3 times at the altar, then stood the stick in the sand. Ma used to do this at a temple, saying the rising smoke carried our words closer to spirits. I laughed at my fraudulence now, just glad the incense kept mozzies away. "I'll cook you a nice dish tonight," I told her. I just didn't know what to feed Popo. In my younger days, friends missing home would join me on taste bud adventures, driving 2 hours to the city for a yum cha morning or a highly rated laksa lunch. If Popo traveled expecting such cuisine from me, she was going to be very disappointed. That night, I came out of the kitchen and set down an offering of rice and a side plate of stir-fried beef and vegetables. Lighting a joss stick, I awkwardly spoke to the air. "Popo, 来吃吧. Please come eat." I eyed the food. Nothing happened. Smoke curled upwards as heat chewed the incense to ash. "A watched pot never boils," I muttered under my breath. Stepping off the deck, I walked towards the balmy sunset. The cricket calls stopped, assessing the threat as I passed before returning to their amorous intent. The minty citrus scent of eucalyptus leaves filled my lungs, its now familiar fragrance soothing my awkward uncertainty at waiting for the essence of dinner to be consumed. Eventually, I returned with a pair of jiaobei, wooden crescent blocks. I threw them like a pair of dice as I asked, "Popo, 你吃完了吗? Have you finished eating?" The communication blocks fell flat side down, curved side up. No. Popo needed more time to enjoy her meal. I snorted. Australian beef must be tastier than her usual offerings. 10 minutes later, I threw the blocks again. One landed flat side up and the other flat side down. Yes, she'd finished. I collected the plates and hesitated. It didn't seem right to eat what had been offered to a spirit, but it felt a waste to throw it away. Eyes darting, heart quickening, I checked that no one would see. With the stomach fluttering in guilt, I hurried to the nearby rushes and scraped the offerings to the ground. It wasn't littering if animals could eat it, right? Or it could decompose and feed the land. Either way, it was better than wasting it in my bin. By the end of the first week, I'd exhausted my interest in daily cooking. By the end of the second week, I was back to cooking in batches. I was a working woman, and if Bobo truly wanted a meal, she could have leftovers like I did. By the end of the month, Bobo's offering bowl held oven nuggets, chips, or the last bite of burger from the local joint. Afterwards, my spoon would clank angrily against the bowl as I scraped food into the rushes. This was a waste of time. "Do you even exist?" I screamed into the swamp one night. The frogs and crickets quietened long enough to hear the returning silence. Then they too ignored me and resumed their chatter. Bobo took longer and longer to finish her meals. Maybe unlit joss sticks affected communications. Maybe my jiaobei throwing wasn't great. Maybe Bobo realized the swamp wasn't a lake and she wasn't getting good energy flow. It made no difference. I tossed the jiaobei repeatedly until one side landed upwards and the other down. One of these throws had to go in my favor. Autumn brought cooler evenings. My hair no longer stuck to my neck while I threw the food out. Dinner was always gone by the next day, unlike the washed-up takeaway containers, shopping bags, and coffee cups that got caught in the bulrushes. I filled my trash bags surrounded by the plucking beats of banjo frogs and the fluttering of preening ducks. They all deserved a swamp that didn't choke them. One evening, I returned to muddy patches on my back steps as if someone had tried to swipe mud off their shoes before stepping onto the deck. Gum leaves rustled, a breeze lifting the hairs from my neck. The mustiest swamp stench came with it as I hurried up the steps, huffing out my nose to clear the stink. And then I saw. Bobo's bowl was so clean, it was as if everything had been licked up. I ran for my broom, eyes darting to the bushes. Heart banging against my ribs, I stabbed the broom into the shrubs, keeping enough distance should a person or a wombat charge out. Only midgy clouds and disrupted crickets appeared. Breathing hard and with every undergrowth beaten, I turned to see Bobo's photo watching me. I hurried back and threw the jiaobei, feeling guilty I'd forgotten her. At least she'd finished eating. Lighting 3 joss sticks, I told the smoke to keep whatever creature had visited away, because if Bobo was truly visiting, I wasn't ready. Yet all week I returned to an emptied bowl. The following evening, I laid the offering out and stayed to watch. No matter how many times I threw the jiaobei after, none of the tosses landed in my favor, as if Bobo wouldn't finish eating while I stood there. An hour later, I tried a different question. "Do you want me to leave?" Yes. Stumbling as I towed my shoes off, I returned to the house. Maybe Bobo really was here, eating my food, answering my questions. Nervous excitement rippled through me with each tick of the clock. 20 years gone and she was finally visiting again. 10 minutes later, I leaned out the door. Mud streaked across my deck. The bowl was empty. A lingering smell of decaying vegetation permeated the area. It had been particularly strong this past week, as if the changing weather was affecting the swamp. The next night, I set out the offering, lit the joss sticks, returned to the house, then snuck looks out the window. But with dusk sweeping in, only the eucalypts stretching long in the waning light could be seen. 15 minutes later, the bowl was empty and Bobo was satisfied. That same mouldy decay scent lingered as I squinted at the dirt clumped on my steps, fading to streaks on my decking. I've never known feral cats or possums to care about muddy footprints before. Troubled, I swept the timber slats until I got to Bobo's photo. She smiled at me, her cheeky grin bringing back a memory buried under years of disappointment. She taught me to make dumplings while she was here. It wasn't until we were steaming the little wrinkled parcels that I'd realized she'd had cravings. I snorted, remembering how we'd crammed them into our delighted mouths until our bellies ached. "New place, new people," she'd said later as we drowsed on the couch. "But always remember your bust." Heaviness grew in my chest, threatening to crush the air from my lungs. I'd gone through the motions of the rituals, but I hadn't believed in the custom, like how I hadn't truly believed in Popo. I gasped for air and found breathing impossible while her smiling face watched. Opening the fly screen, I reached for the safety of my house. The bagua caught my reflection, reminding me of Popo's message about a thing looking through my window. The heaviness eased, air returned, understanding dawned. I'd forgotten my past and what came with it, the old ways of protection and family looking after each other. Popo had been watching out for me, even in spirit. I made more effort. Old cookbooks came out in my kitchen filled with smells. Fried rice, steamed ginger fish, green curry, stir-fried noodles, chili crab, fried fish, even laksa. I gave it all a try, speaking to her about my day as I moved around the kitchen. I felt lighter as I teased out childhood memories of our times together. They were more than I remembered, and I started to wonder if she'd disliked Australia on her visit, not because of the place, but because it had taken us so far apart. I still couldn't cook every day, so in between we had hot toasties, nuggets, and battered fish. I started leaving larger and larger portions, and it warmed me to see the bowl emptied every night. Curious things started to appear in it. First, it was a handful of purple-blue berries. I've been told in Australia, if it was bright, it was poisonous. Was Popo finding my cooking that bad? I showed it to the elder as she walked past the next day. She picked one right out of my palm and popped it into her mouth. Idbul, good for tea. That night, I stared at the stalks of leaves in the freshly emptied bowl. I knew these. They grew abundantly on one edge of the swamp. When I consulted the elder the next morning, she told me to chew one. Cautiously, I bit an end. Its peppery, spicy flavor burst on my tongue, causing my face to scrunch. She laughed. Barin, it's good for catching fish, but we can also eat it. I squinted suspiciously at the foliage. These were very specific to the local swampland. I doubted Popo came across the knowledge of their edibility on her own. On the third night, I waited on the other side of the back door while Popo finished dinner. A new theory was building in my mind. I took occasional sniffs of the air until I caught the scent of mouldy vegetation and wet earth. Pressing my ear to the door, I heard a shuffling of feet, or maybe it was dried leaves scattering across the deck. Faint scolding followed, more air than voice in intonations. I hadn't heard it in years, or it might have been the chatter of bulrush seed capsules brushing against each other. But I didn't think so. I think it was more than just Popo coming on these visits. Afterward, there were thick, dirty roots in the bowl. Once more, it was the elder who enlightened me. We used to dry it in the sun before eating. That night, I baked the tuber roots wrapped in peppery leaves and stewing in homemade nidbul juice. While waiting for the timer to ring, I squinted at the sun dropping towards the swamp. Popo wouldn't know all these outback plants like the Aboriginal elder did. I don't know how Popo did it, but I'm certain she was learning from some funny-smelling bunyip. I frowned at the fading light. Should I be worried about Popo hanging out with a spirit that might have eaten a boy? The fiery ball winked between the gum trees as if smirking at me, and I laughed. The kid was probably a man now living in another country, scolding his own child for littering. The oven buzzed. I pulled the tray out and dished a portion into the offering bowl. There was nothing to worry about. Popo was looking out for me, and I was excited to share this homemade recipe with her. With them. Setting down the offering and lighting 3 joss sticks, I bowed my grace for her care and company. 来，大家, come everyone, I invited. 我们吃. Let's eat. I hope you all like it. Next day, Ma rang again. Lily, we spoke to the medium again. Popo's 100 days finishes tonight and she'll be moving on to her new life. She's so happy, says her friend from the lake has been showing her many things, and they like your tasty dishes. Popo wishes she visited more because you live in a very interesting place. Ayya, my mother's all adventure. She asks if you can look after her friend who is so lonely. Do you know what she's talking about? Look after yourself, okay? I set the receiver down, blinking through my stinging eyes. Popo only had 100 days? There were still so many recipes for us to try together. I swiped away the falling tears. I'd already gotten more time than I expected, but if she had to go, I would give her a send-off she wouldn't forget. That night, I cooked a mini banquet, dishing out a little of everything. As I bowed with the joss sticks in my hands, I thanked her for her approach, for looking after me, and for reconnecting us. I promised to look after her lake friend and invited her to one last meal. Goodbye was harder than I thought. The irony was too much. The spirit I hadn't believed in had become friends with a myth that didn't exist, and soon they would both be gone. When I returned to the empty bowl, I laughed and cringed at the widgery grubs squirming within. If Popo's new friend was still expanding the horizons of my taste buds, maybe I wouldn't lose them both. In the morning, I dismantled the altar. With Popo gone, I wanted her photo in the house with me. I set a tray down instead for future meals. Food was the best way to look after friends. A tightness squeezed in my chest. Popo may not have actually been here, but the place already felt emptier. The elder walked by as I was taking down the bagua. I told you there was no need, she said. You're good to the swamp. I watched as she walked on. Perhaps it was time I shared my cooking with another. She might even have suggestions on what to feed a bunyip. I called out, Would you like to come for dinner tonight?
There are many things that I love about this story. I especially love how swamp culture embraces you and your ancestral spirits, if you both let it and respect it. Lily definitely does that. But that isn't what I want to primarily remark upon here. At Cast of Wonders, we sometimes choose stories, such as Feeding Spirits, where none of the characters are young adults or are dealing with traditional young adult issues or themes. For example, coming of age, school, leaving the nest, etc. What I love that this story shows is that no matter one's age, we can all fall into the patterns of our youth when dealing with parents, grandparents, or elders, even when they're no longer with us. Emotions that we haven't felt since we were perhaps teenagers well up as we strive to figure out what is expected of us. For example, Lily's impatience as she throws the xiaobei, waiting for her Popo to finish eating. While it may seem exasperating at times, my own mother told me to stand up straight the other day, and I'm 47. I don't think would want it any other way. For that would mean her family is gone, alive, spirits or otherwise. Join us again soon. We love bringing you the best audio fiction week after week, but we can't do it without your support. Your donations pay our authors, our narrators, our servers, and our staff. Please consider supporting us with a monthly donation through either PayPal or Patreon. You can also review us on Apple Podcasts, request us on Spotify, and consider the stories we publish for award consideration. There are lots of ways you can help. You can join the discussion on the EA Discord and visit us on Blue Sky at castofwonders.org. Come say hello. Cast of Wonders is brought to you by editor Catherine Inskip, assistant editors Alicia Caparasso and Amy Brennan, associate editors Rebecca Ahn, Tanya Adelit, Kit Kelstow, Cup Hakab, Adri Joy, Becca Miles, Ray O, Samuel Poots, Emma Smales, Denise Sudell, Eleanor Wall, Rin Yi, and Angela Zazueta. Our audio producers are Jeremy Carter and Andrew Jack. Cast of Wonders is part of the Escape Artists Foundation, a 501c3 nonprofit, and this episode is distributed under the Creative Commons Attribution, Non-Commercial, No Derivatives 4.0 International License. That means you can download or listen to the episode on any device you like, but you can't change it or sell it. Our theme music is Appeal to Heavens by Alexia Nove, available from Promo DJ or his Facebook page. Thank you for listening.